Welcome to This Explainer. You know that exact feeling, right? You walk into a crowded room, maybe you're running just a few minutes late, and suddenly, boom, it feels like this heavy physical spotlight has snapped right onto you. You just know every single eye is locked on your face, analyzing your outfit, judging your posture, silently critiquing the way you walk. It's an incredibly uncomfortable, universal feeling. But what if I told you that this intense, suffocating sense of being watched is actually almost entirely a fabrication of your own mind? Today, we're going to break down the actual science of why we assume everyone is judging us, and, way more importantly, we'll look at how we can finally escape that illusion to live a much freer life. Let's dive in.
To really understand this, let's picture a scenario we've probably all lived through. Imagine you're at a party and you accidentally spill a drink right down the front of your shirt. Or maybe you're giving a presentation at work and you just totally stumble over your words. In that exact fraction of a second, this massive wave of self-consciousness just hits you, doesn't it? Your heart races, your face flushes red, and social anxiety completely takes the wheel. Your immediate thought is always, oh no, literally everyone just saw that, everyone is going to be talking about this. But why? Why is our default setting to immediately assume maximal public humiliation?
Well, the answer lies in a super well-documented psychological phenomenon called the spotlight effect. Basically, it's a cognitive bias that makes us wildly overestimate how much other people are paying attention to our appearance and our actions. And it actually makes sense when you look at our evolutionary roots. Back when our ancestors lived in small tribes, being accepted by the group was literally a matter of life and death. If you were cast out, you just wouldn't survive. Because of that deep-seated need to belong, we evolved to put ourselves right at the center of our own world. We get trapped in this egocentric perspective, hyper-vigilant about how others perceive us, making us feel like we are the absolute center of the universe.
To test just how powerful this bias really is, a group of researchers, Thomas Skilovich, Victoria Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky, conducted a fascinating and honestly, slightly cruel psychological study back in the year 2000. It's famously known as the Barry-Manilow experiment. The setup was brilliantly simple. They forced a target participant to put on a t-shirt featuring a giant, super embarrassing picture of the singer Barry Manilow. Then they made this poor participant walk right into a room full of their peers. Afterwards, they pulled them aside and asked a really simple question. How many people in that room do you think actually noticed your embarrassing shirt?
The gap between their anxiety and the actual reality was just massive. Because the participants felt so incredibly self-conscious, they predicted that about 50% of the room, half the people there, noticed the Barry Manilow shirt. But in reality, when the researchers went and tested the room, only about 23% of the observers actually remembered the shirt at all. The participants overestimated how much they stood out by more than double. They were literally just projecting their own internal embarrassment onto the external audience.
And you know, this dynamic perfectly illustrates a closely related concept called the illusion of transparency. Because the spotlight effect doesn't just apply to physical things like spilled drinks or embarrassing t-shirts, it extends way down into our internal emotional states. We falsely believe that our internal anxiety, our nervousness, or even our boredom is just radiating out of us, like a neon sign easily readable by everyone around us. We think, oh man, they can totally tell I'm freaking out right now. But the science clearly shows us that people are actually terrible at reading our internal states. Your internal storm is, for the most part, completely invisible from the outside.
Which brings us to a massive plot twist in human psychology. So, okay, we suffer from the spotlight effect, believing everyone is meticulously tracking our every single move. But what is everyone else actually doing? Well, they're operating under a completely different phenomenon called inattentional blindness. You see, while you think you are the star of the play, the audience isn't even looking at the stage.
To prove this, we have to look at this totally groundbreaking 1999 experiment by psychologists Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons. In this study, participants watched a video of two teams passing a basketball, one team in white shirts, the other in black shirts. The participants were given a very specific task: silently count the exact number of passes made by the team in white. It requires a lot of really intense focus. Then, right in the middle of the video, a person in a full gorilla suit walks directly into the middle of the players, stops, thumps their chest, and just walks off.
Now, here is the absolute kicker. When researchers asked the participants if they noticed anything unusual in the video, an astonishing 50% of them completely missed the gorilla. Just let that sink in for a second. Half the people staring directly at a screen totally failed to see a human-sized gorilla beating its chest right in the center of the frame. No way, right? But it's true.
So why on earth does a giant gorilla go completely unnoticed?
And, by extension, why does your super embarrassing moment go unnoticed? It all comes down to how our brains allocate resources. When we're focused on a task, meaning our cognitive load is high, our brains create a mental schema of what is important and just filter out the rest. It essentially creates perceptual tunnel vision. Think about this in the context of your daily life. People miss the gorilla. They miss you dropping your pen. They miss your slightly wrinkled shirt because their cognitive resources are completely consumed by their own basketball passes. They are worried about their own jobs, their own families, their own insecurities.
All right, now that we have the diagnosis from modern psychology, where do we find the cure? Well, for that, we actually need to look backwards to ancient Stoic philosophy. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks. And often, as author Ryan Holiday points out, the attacks we face are actually coming from the inside. It's our own ego, our own anxiety, our own internal turmoil dragging us down. Philosophy is the training we use to basically wrestle that anxiety into submission.
To truly escape the spotlight effect, Stoicism challenges us to shift our metric for success entirely. We have to move away from what's called the outer scorecard. The outer scorecard is entirely dependent on everyone else's judgments. Judgments that, as we've just learned from the data, are mostly an illusion anyway because everyone is suffering from inattentional blindness. Instead, we need to focus strictly on our inner scorecard. This is all about our own character. Are we acting justly? Are we being courageous? Are we disciplined? The inner scorecard is quite literally the only one you actually control.
Now, shifting to that inner scorecard requires active daily practice. Ryan Holiday describes this as building an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind, because you don't just magically stop caring what people think overnight. You have to train for it. It involves strict daily habits, things like waking up early to center yourself before the world gets too loud, reading something challenging every single day, relentlessly focusing only on what is within your control and actively letting go of the rest. You might even want to keep a commonplace book of wise sayings to guide you when you feel a bit lost. And above all, not arguing with reality. It's about fighting every single day to be the person that philosophy wants you to be.
And one of the most absolutely powerful tools for building that inner citadel is a really simple one: reading. The Stoics literally viewed reading as a way of having conversations with the dead. Think about it. When you read history or when you read philosophy, you put yourself in a room with the wisest minds to ever live. You realize that human beings have been struggling with the exact same anxiety, embarrassment, and fear for thousands of years. Gaining that deep historical perspective instantly shrinks your own temporary, localized problems right down to size. It softens your solitude and arms you with some truly timeless counsel.
But what about when you're just out in the world going about your day and that spotlight feeling suddenly hits you? Well, the cognitive experts at MindLift provide a fantastic 3-step strategy to overcome this bias in real time. Step 1 is simple awareness. Just pause and notice that you are experiencing an irrational negative thought. Step 2 is the real game changer. Step out of your own head and into a third-person perspective. Ask yourself, if I saw a total stranger drop a pen or stumble over a word, would I judge them harshly? Of course not. You'd probably barely notice, or you'd just feel empathy. So step 3 is to reframe that thought with self-compassion. Treat yourself with the exact same grace you would readily offer a stranger.
When you consistently apply these tools, when you really understand the psychology of inattentional blindness and apply the philosophy of the inner scorecard, something absolutely amazing happens. You get to drop the exhausting performance. Because you aren't constantly worried about conforming to the imaginary judgments of the crowd anymore, you finally have the bandwidth to embrace the positive, totally unique parts of exactly who you are. You can recognize your own strengths and build a life based on your own autonomy, rather than constantly seeking approval.
As Ryan Holiday so bluntly but perfectly puts it, nobody is thinking about you. They're too busy thinking about themselves. I really want you to internalize that for a second. At first glance, yeah, it might sound a bit cynical, maybe even depressing, but actually, it is the most liberating truth you could possibly discover. It frees you entirely from the heavy, crushing burden of assumed scrutiny. You are finally off stage. You are free to just live.
So the absolutely crucial point we are left with today is this. The spotlight, it's unplugged. The crowd is looking the other way, totally busy counting their own basketball passes. If absolutely no one is obsessing over your outer scorecard, what are you going to choose to write on your inner one today? It's entirely up to you. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I really hope you leave this explainer feeling a little lighter and a whole lot freer. Catch you next time.